70% of betrayed partners meet the clinical criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder.
And they say this cannot continue and will not continue. And the only options that we have is to split up or begin communicating in all the ways that we wanted to, but we're afraid to. And now they have no more fear to do that. So they push through it, and then they have the conversations.
When couples make that, then they get a marriage that's built on something really solid around truth, around accountability, around mutuality, around emotional safety.
Is it even possible to come back from an affair and build a relationship that's actually happy? What do you say to people when they ask that question? Are you ever afraid that an affair is going to happen in your relationship? Or have you already had one happen in your relationship? Have you experienced that painful betrayal and wondered how to come back from it? There's a lot of you listening right now who are in the middle of an affair process or have said goodbye to a partner forever because they cheated. If that's ever been a problem in your relationships, or if you are terrified that you're going to face this betrayal, this is the episode you need to hear. We've brought on Dr. Alexandra Solomon, an expert in intimacy, in betrayal, and in human relationships, to work with me today to work on building a bulletproof relationship against affairs. And if it's already happened, how to repair that bond and build the best connection you've ever known. Dr. Solomon, welcome to the show.
All right, guys, so let's dive right into this conversation. We have Dr. Alexandra Solomon. We have Adam Lane Smith. You guys are fantastic experts in the space of relationships, but you have this different side of relationships that you guys are experts in. So the ultimate question that our audience would love to know the answer to, especially the female side, is why is it the men who mostly cheat in relationships?
I'm not convinced it is mostly men that cheat in relationships.
Women cheat more than men. What do you think, Dr. Solomon?
You know, the data is tricky to gather, as we might imagine. It's hard to be honest about questions about infidelity. It's an incredibly taboo topic. But the data that I have seen indicates that women have largely sort of filled the gender gap. But I think that you're right, Andre, that for a very long time, men were more likely to be unfaithful than women were. And I suspect that in other cultural contexts, that remains the same, right? For in some cultural contexts, the punishment for a woman is vastly different than a punishment for a man who cheats. But I think that here in the US, current modern data I have seen indicates, backs up what Adam is suggesting, is that we maybe are just about to the point where we close that gender gap.
Wow. But that's a pretty recent change from what I understand, because a lot of the viewers that we have coming in, they asked the question. It was like, it's, my boyfriend, my husband, my fiance, they're the ones who bring it up. Is it the men just don't talk about it?
When I think about my clinical practice as well, I have lots of at any given moment, I think most of the couples that I'm treating are in post-infidelity recovery exploration, and more likely than not, it is him who's cheated. But that may be that her infidelity is more likely to be a relationship ending event than his infidelity is. So I don't know how many couples are seeking therapy after her infidelity. So it may be that you don't, my audience, like your audience, skews female. So of course you have got women who are concerned about his infidelity, perhaps. And I think her infidelity is rather subterranean. I don't know how much she's talking about her indiscretion. There's a lot of shame around female women who cheat.
I agree with that. I also think that when a woman is so fed up in the relationship or so distant or disconnected, whatever the reason may be for that infidelity, I don't think that there's much coming back from that. It seems to be in a lot of relationships that women often are a bit of the glue that holds everything together. The men, if they chase after an infidelity, that's usually because they have some anxious attachment pieces. They're more approval seeking, and that's usually seen as being somewhat, ideally in our society, we say weaker, but it's that approval looking thing is not good for most men. Women don't respect men like that, quite honestly. It's very hard for a man to chase after a woman and then build that respect up again. I wonder if that's a big component of what we're seeing is The men who
Hmm.
stick it out after an affair don't have that respect from their partner the same way maybe that women do. Is that a thought?
Ooh, that's a thought that takes me to wanting to like ensure that we honor the cultural context. I think that there's a way that we've all been socialized in patriarchy, and I think that the way that we socialize boys and men in patriarchy would give them the message that if they're cheated on, it's a real threat to their masculinity, and so then for him to pursue post breach would then feel like a further, you know, assault on his masculinity. So him pulling back may be less about an attachment process and more about an effort to save face. I don't know. I think when I think about the men where I have had a chance to work with them post infidelity, we've had to work pretty directly on his own how to help him hold on to his masculinity and a sense of like pride. I mean, I think there's when I have any couple of any gender where they're in treatment with me after a breach, I am really clear with the betrayed partner that listen, we don't know where this work is going, but I respect you for even sitting with the question of is there anything we can build from these ashes, but that is not how it feels to be the betrayed partner of any gender, right? It feels grovelly, it feels like weakness, it feels shameful. So I'm really explicit about, listen, I know you feel ashamed of yourself for considering the idea of repair, but let's put that on the table and know that I don't carry any of that on, from where I stand.
Agreed. I think it's interesting to note that the research does indicate traditionally, again, things have changed in the last 10 years. Traditionally, though, women tend to be more concerned about emotional affairs. Men tend to be more concerned about physical affairs. Both sides are concerned about both, but those are a bit more threatening, maybe from evolutionary context or something. We're trying to sort that out. Do you think that may be playing a role in it? Do you think that men who have a female partner who purely has an emotional affair, do you think that might be a little bit easier for them to manage than a physical affair?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can it would take me a couple of hands to count the number of times that men have said to their female partner, she meant nothing to me. The other woman meant nothing to me. It was really just sexual. And I think that is difficult. I think that's I don't know how much water that idea carries, I think it's still like pain is pain, and but that idea of like maybe there's a bit more compartmentalization.
What do you think? What do you think is the background for those men saying that? Because that's what most of our audience has heard. Hey, it meant nothing to me. It's not a threat to you. Don't be too upset. That's what a lot of our audience hears following an affair when it's discovered. And it's such a strange, disturbing message for many of them because their thought is, how could it possibly have meant nothing to you? What must I mean? If that meant nothing, then I must be less than nothing. What do you think those men are trying to articulate inside that?
Yeah. Well, I think that you're right. It is, it's offered as a salve, like I want you to feel better by me saying she meant nothing to me. But to your point exactly, Adam, that's not how it oftentimes lands for her, for the wife. Um, I think oftentimes, I think that there is for him or for any partner who has cheated, there's a sense of confusion of like, I actually don't know why I did what I did. So I think in the beginning phase, there's a lot of scraping together of just approximations of a why. But in my experience, that why takes a while to come to. And, I think about my friend Esther Perel, who said something that just lands so deeply, which is that it is oftentimes not the other person that we're seeking, the gaze of that other person that we're seeking in an affair, but rather what we're seeking is another version of ourselves. So what he might be saying is actually, she meant nothing to me. What meant something to me was I was desperately trying to seek a lost part of myself. She and that container of the affair was the space in which I was trying to conjure up some part of me that I've lost sight of. So that might be what he's saying.
So based on all of this, how do I know that my attachment style is broken and what are the signs?
Well, if you're already wondering that, odds are very good that you have some attachment challenges, and the research does indicate at least 65% of American adults have attachment issues now. So anybody listening to this almost certainly has those problems. But if you are wondering, you need to take an authentic, serious attachment assessment. Not an attachment quiz that spits things out in 1 minute, but an assessment drawn from real practical science. I've built one of these on my website, adamlanesmith.com, under resources where you can take a free attachment styles assessment right now and get your results plus practical steps to overcome those challenges you're experiencing. Go to adamlanesmith.com, click on resources, click on free attachment assessment, and then I'll walk you through the program.
So, what are some of these more common fault lines that you see repeating in marriages, which could lead to an affair or maybe frequently lead to an affair?
Well, it oftentimes is people have really um gotten lost in like the division of labor and the roles. One is really burdened by the responsibility of being a provider, and the other is really, really burdened by the responsibility of running a home, and so they've kind of lost each other in the roles. There's a scarcity of time. The relationship isn't protected. We're in an era of parenting that's like, we call it like parenting Inc., right? Where it's like certainly not every family, but a lot of families that I see who have an amount of privilege. I mean, the weekends are absolutely consumed by the lessons and the travel soccer and the, birthday. Every kid has a, grand birthday party every single year, which means that every weekend you're shuttling kids to multiple birthday parties, and there's just no space for the couple. I mean, I think about when I grew up in the 70s and 80s, like the kids in my family, we tucked into whatever the heck our parents wanted to do, and I'm the parent now of young adults, and our weekends were organized around, around them. So I think when infidelity happens during that like season of life, it often is that people are just depleted. There's like a time poverty. The marriage is sort of the last thing that is tended to. Those are some of my initial thoughts.
What do you see in your practice?
No, she's very right. It's the wear and tear of daily life. It's not spending that adequate time together. It's not doing that. And then the deeper level beneath that I often see is they don't have the skills to talk about those moments. They don't have the skills to come back at the end of the day and say, "Hey, you know what? I felt really lonely for 3 months, 6 months. What can we do about it?" They get into that cycle, and maybe the wife sits there and has a moment where she says, "Wow, I just feel so disconnected. How can I say this to him? What can I do?" And she gets so wrapped up in the how that she never does it because she never reaches that stage. And a lot of the women listening to this right now might be in that cycle. They don't know how to begin the conversation. But from the other side, just as much, there's the men who feel like there's nothing I can do. This is as good as it gets. My job is to shackle myself to the wheel and continue working.
Until something breaks.
Until something breaks. My wife doesn't want more than this from me. I shouldn't ask her because that's weak, or that's needy. Or if she wanted to give that to me, she would already be doing it. So a lot of them don't have the skills or even the comprehension that they can build a more collaborative relationship. And usually what I see is I don't want to say this. I want to say this very carefully because I don't want to say that affairs are ever a good thing, but they can at times be a catalyst to break some couples out of that stalemate. And they say, this cannot continue and will not continue. And the only options that we have is to split up or begin communicating in all the ways that we wanted to, but we're afraid to. And now they have no more fear to do that. So they push through it, and then they have the conversations. For the couples who end up successful, that's the only pathway that I've seen, is to start conversing.
So how should a safe, secure relationship feel like?
How should it feel like?
Yeah, because most people don't understand. The reason why I'm asking is because you're describing a circumstance in which probably about 60%, 70% of couples live. They live in the rat race. They live in these very specific gender roles. They do take care, of their kids ahead of their own needs. They're locked into the lifestyle that we just described, and that to me means that 70%, whatever percentage is, of those couples are at risk of affairs. So what should it feel like so that you're not at risk of affairs, or at least it's less risk of affairs?
Like what state to reach, and how will you know that it's okay?
Yeah.
Dr. Solomon, would you like to go first?
Well, the first thing I think of course, is the Gottman's, 40 years worth of research that basically boils down to one theme, which is that in an emotionally secure relationship, when I'm in pain, you drop what you're doing and you say, okay, let's pay attention. I don't have to be 5 alarm fire, standing on my head, screaming at the top of my lungs for you to attend to whatever I'm struggling with. I say to you, hey, something's not feeling right. And you turn toward me and you say, let's figure it out. There's a sense of trust that whatever I'm carrying right now, my resentment, my anger, my loneliness, says something to us about our relational ecosystem. Adam did a really beautiful job a moment ago, kind of like describing like what it feels like. And yeah, what it feels like for her oftentimes is rage, right? She's enraged, she's irritated, she feels unseen. And then I think maybe Adam, you also said this part. He feels like nothing he can do is enough. And if he asks for what he wants and needs, it's going to land for her like another demand. That's the symptom. And the remedy is that each partner trusts that whatever one of us is carrying is a part of an entire dynamic that we both need to be looking at and understanding together. So then it's like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you for telling me that you feel lonely. Your loneliness is our problem. It's not my fault. It's not saying I suck as a husband, da da da. It is you are telling me something important about what's happening to our relational ecosystem.
I love that. That's very true. It's if you want to think of it this way, Andre, to your question, it's a double skill set combined with trust between them. Just like Dr. Solomon said, it's a double skill set in that both partners need to be able to go and articulate to the other person what they're experiencing without it being a 5 alarm fire and say, hey, I'm having this experience. This is going on for me. And the other person needs to be able to receive that productively. And if they speak in emotional languages or logical languages, they need to be able to converse and ask questions and reach mutual understanding. So there is a communication element. You have to be trained into that, hopefully in childhood by your parents or learn it later in life. But you have to be able to give and receive that communication back and forth. If the wife goes and says, hey, I want to talk to you. I've been feeling really lonely lately. The husband doesn't say, well, I'm doing my best. He says, well, okay, tell me more. What's going on? Well, this is what I'm feeling. Okay. Oh, I hear you. What can you think of anything that might help with that? What could we do? When has that been absent? Has it always been there? He doesn't have to be her therapist, but dig for a little bit of information the way that you would for solving any other problem. And then that double skill set, great. That's part of secure attachment. And then the trust between them that it's going to be relatively frictionless, not painful, not agonizing. You don't have to convince the other person to care. They're actually going to listen to you and want to resolve this because you're mutually connected. Those are the elements. And if you have that or build that as a couple, it makes you, I'm not going to say completely resilient against any possibility of affair, but it cuts the risk drastically because then if you feel sad, if you feel lonely, if you feel tempted even, you can go let your partner know and say, hey, I had this feeling. It's not a threat to our relationship, but it did tell me that we are definitely drifting farther than we should be. And I'd love for us to come back to the center. Can we do that? Here's what it would mean for me. Here's what it would mean for you. Can we try this? It'll be so exciting. And they can renew that bond.
Okay, so what are some of the red flags that you should be watching on your relationship so you need to have this conversation, say, today, as opposed to just pushing it off forever?
So not red flags for cheating right now kind of thing,
Yes.
but red flags for your relationship is at risk of an affair
Preventative.
or a breach or even just your affair, your relationship is not optimal for you.
Mm.
Dr. Solomon, what red flags do you tell your clients to look for?
The first one I think about is from Psychology 101, the fundamental attribution error, which is that, if my husband does something that is disappointing or frustrating to me, rather than saying he hates me, he doesn't respect me, the red flag is his disappointing behavior I view as a reflection of his disdain for me, of his inadequacy, versus in a thriving moment in our relationship, he does something disappointing and I say, I wonder why he did that. He must be super distracted at work. You know, that when we're in a place of health and vibrance, our partner's unfortunate moments feel like unfortunate moments. When our relationship is strained and we're disconnected, our partner's unfortunate moments feel like commentary on their character, on our relationship, on how they view us. So that's something I would like people to pay attention to, is like, what's the story you make up inside of yourself about your partner's behavior? How much benefit of the doubt? I mean, I feel like that's something that comes up all the time in my couple therapy. One of the big goals that couples are saying is, I just want to create a relationship where we're giving each other the benefit of the doubt again.
This is amazing. And it goes right back to the Gottman's Four Horsemen as well for contempt. And that goes both ways. So if somebody is giving contempt in the relationship and acting with contempt, speaking with contempt, absolutely terrible. That's one of the four horsemen of your relationship apocalypse. But the other side is if you're constantly perceiving contempt that may not be there. And that's that risk of anxious attachment, insecurities, high levels of stress can cause you to do that. All of those pieces. If your partner is not contemptuous and you're still seeing it and feeling it and believing it constantly, you will ruin the relationship from your side by accident without meaning to.
Mm-hmm. You know, I want to add to that because a moment ago when you were talking about wanting a partner to say, hey, I'm feeling lonely, there's something really important in how we raise the issue. You know, Adam was naming this like sort of twin skill set of raising an issue and then being receptive to the issue. The person raising the issue does have some responsibility to get themselves as regulated as possible and to raise a concern, which is hard because I'm raising a concern. I'm feeling frustrated. I want to be heard, but can I regulate myself enough that I can really raise this in a way that is actually an invitation that stacks the deck in my partner's behavior to not get defensive? And when I'm working, especially with a woman on this, how to raise a concern in an inviting way, it is often really hard to support her attending to this because she already often feels like she's done so freaking much emotional labor in this relationship. And she has been nice and polite and she's tried so hard and that hasn't worked. And so then she's gotten angry. So it is really hard to support, to honor all the frustration that drove her to that place of anger and help her stack the deck in her favor, of doing what is effective, even if she has every single right to her anger. It's about focusing on what's effective. So that's some of the paradox, some of the tension in that part that Adam is speaking to.
So could you guys walk me through the life cycle of an affair from like the point where you have this beautiful connection and then you start losing it and then the tension builds exactly you described it, Dr. Solomon, and then the affair happens, and then what happens after in a good case scenario and what happens after in a bad case scenario?
Well, I think that generally an affair that is disclosed rather than discovered can be a little bit easier to come back from. There's no prescription. I've had couples where I think, oh boy, there's every metric of this being a really hard case, and couples have come through and built something really quite beautiful from the ashes. And times where it is sort of a like best of the worst case scenario and couples haven't come through it. So, but I would say when it's disclosed rather than discovered, that tends to be easier. When the truth comes out all at once rather than dripped, that is easier. And the reason I want couples to be with a therapist in the immediate aftermath is that more isn't necessarily better. I think the betrayed partner needs to have a general understanding of the timeline, of the kind of like length, width, and depth of this thing. But I don't want the betrayed partner to have so much information that their traumatized brain has even more to grasp onto. Images about what their figure looks like versus my figure, images about the positions that you were in and how many times. And I think that more is not always better. I think the betrayed partner certainly needs to have enough understanding that they feel like their feet are on somewhat of solid ground. But I am very protective of betrayed partners not overwhelming themselves, because we know there's been some research that indicates that about 70% of betrayed partners meet the clinical criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. So they're already primed to have repetitive thoughts, intrusive images, flashbacks. So I don't want them to have more than they need in order to make decisions. And then the last piece, and then I'll let Adam jump in. I have a lot to say on this topic.
Absolutely.
That's
The
good.
last piece that I'll just put in right away is Sue Johnson, who created emotion focused therapy, which is an attachment based therapeutic approach, like gold standard, empirically validated approach. And her finding when she looked long term at couples where there had been infidelity, the number one predictor of whether a relationship would be able to be rebuilt was the betraying partner's commitment to open-heartedness, emotional attunement, presence, kind of carrying the triggers as a team. That's the make or break. And that feels so true with my clinical cases, the cases where the betraying partner is like, oh, it's no big deal. Get over it already. My brother did it 5 other times. It was only one time. Da, da, da. Those cases, it's very hard to rebuild. So the betraying partner's open heart is just huge.
I know that a lot of the people watching this show right now have had attachment issues for their entire life. That's why I want to invite every single one of you to check out my attachment repair program. It just might be the jump that you need to go from insecurely attached and lonely and frustrated to fully secure, connected, and bonded in a great relationship like nothing you've ever felt before. Check out my website, adamlanesmith.com, for the attachment repair program. I love this so much. And I fully 100% agree with you that the betrayed partner does not need that in-depth breakdown of positions and times. And that is some of the worst information you can take into your brain. It does nothing for you. Everybody out there, please, please listen. It does nothing for you except hurt you more and more. It does not give you closure. This is not going to give you a clue about why it happened. You didn't have your partner stray because you didn't do a number of positions for them or anything like that. It was not that at all. And that information in the aftermath, you're grasping for any clue or type of closure or understanding as your brain is desperately trying to understand, why did I get hurt and how do I make sure I never get hurt like this again? Why is my relationship being ripped apart? You don't need that information. It does not ever really help. To the second point, what I wanted to say was absolutely yes. When the partner who did the cheating and had the affair, the number one thing is, yes, their open-heartedness, but even more than that, I think it's they have to be bothered by what they did, so much so that they see it as a change in themselves. They have to fully differentiate from the person and the behavior patterns they had before. They have to become a person who could not possibly have an affair ever again going forward because they've learned such constructive and in-depth lessons, and I don't say their morals have changed. It's not that they're bad people, but their dedication to their own principles and to their own ethics over letting their stress get the better of them, over their self-management, really diving deep. It almost, in some ways, from what I've seen, it almost resembles a religious conversion or an ethical full conversion of, this bothered me. I am not going to let this happen again. Even if we separate, I will continue this work. It is internally driven. And then they go out and they speak to other people about it, and they get accountability from their family and their friends or mentors or religious figures or whomever it might be. And then it's no longer the betrayed partner's job to police them. The betrayed partner doesn't have to be the CIA agent following them everywhere, constantly analyzing and tracking, because everybody in their life is now doing that for them. They have the room to relax and grieve. It makes all the difference in the world. And only that really allows the relationship to flourish.
I agree 100%. And that's something that is a place where I think the attachment frame makes a ton of sense. Like when a betraying partner does that internal work, understands their own childhood patterns and wounds that led them to be somebody who's at risk of doing that, of somebody who's able to step out of their own integrity and then does that healing work of being in their own integrity, the betrayed partner feels that. That's what actually trust is. To your point, Adam, trust is not hypervigilance. Trust is not monitoring. Trust is when I feel you near me, you feel like somebody whose whole self is here with me. And that's something that goes beyond words. That is beyond verbal reassurance. It's like, no, I feel my partner's different now. I feel my partner lives inside of themselves in a deeper way.
And that's the question I get so often from my clients is, Adam, how can I ever know when this is okay again? I don't think I'm ever going to be able to relax. How would I even know that it was okay? And you have to. This relationship won't work until it transforms so fundamentally daily down to the minute in your relationships. Not that it'll be perfect, but it is such an overwhelming transformation from the place it was that allowed for the affair to even take place to a relationship where no affair could possibly take place again. Not because the person is so monitored, but because of the depth of connection, the investment, the bonding, the transparency, the warm intimacy is something that could not take place inside of a relationship where affairs were then possible.
Well, it's the point you were making before about like nobody would ever, ever wish an affair on their worst enemy. But what betrayed partners often say is like, listen, if we're gonna rebuild this thing, I'm not going back to some namby-pamby, weak ass, watered down version of a marriage. Like I'm only staying if we're gonna create something extraordinary. So that is the benefit that they both get for their hard work is like we're not doing that anymore. This matters too much. And for the betrayed partner, it's like I matter too much. I deserve something that actually feels nourishing to me.
One thing I hear a lot, and I'd love for you to speak to our audience on this topic, because I'm sure they're asking the question right now, because I get it quite often, is it even possible to come back from an affair and build a relationship that's actually happy? Do you always have that misery in the back of your head? Does it ever go away? Can I ever relax? Will I ever be okay again? What do you say to people when they ask that question?
I mean, it's why I wish I could put people on my shoulder and come have them come with me, during my week with my couples. What a privilege it is that I get to be in the most interior room of people's lives and their hearts, and I have a front row seat to people's healing journeys. And I mean, I have seen it. I've seen it, and I felt it with couples, and it is not easy, and it's not a matter of months. And it may be that anniversaries of the discovery date always suck, you know. So you don't go back to the marriage that you had, but the marriages that I have seen marriages that get built, in the aftermath that are really so beautiful. They're built on an entirely different foundation. This is I call it like the Disney did us dirty principle. We all go into marriage with these starry eyes, believing that, if it's your soulmate, you're not ever going to have pain. And couples that come through infidelity and make the choice to rebuild, and then there's no moral high ground on rebuilding. Just like there's no moral high ground on not rebuilding. It's not better or worse, but when couples do make the choice to rebuild after infidelity in the ways that we're talking about it, not a white knuckle rebuilding, but like an actual rebuilding, then they get a marriage that's built on something really solid around truth, around accountability, around mutuality, around emotional safety. And so I do think that people can feel joy again. I think people feel joy sometimes in the process of repairing the thing. And that we have to talk about that too, because, when a betrayed partner is like, oh my God, all I want to do is have sex with my partner. We're having the best sex of our lives, and they can feel guilty about it. My response is that joy and pleasure are also medicine. Those are the ways that you also dip your littlest tip of your baby toe into the water and see what's there. And so, then a betrayed partner says, like, listen, I want to make love with you and I want to enjoy myself, but this does not mean we're done. And the betraying partner says, I got it. I got it. But we also deserve to have fun. And that's also medicine. That we leverage the good stuff just in the same way we have hard conversations.
It's so confusing for couples when they start
It's so
to get better.
confusing.
They do, because they start to get better, and then they say, "I'm afraid if I say I love you again, you'll stop doing the work," or "I'm afraid if I give you a hug, you'll cheat on me again," or so many things. And even the partner who did the betraying says, "I feel so bad about what I've done. It's hard for me to perform in the bedroom many times." But they do. You're 100% right. They have never felt closer than they do, and it's so confusing for them, and it's such a difficult experience. But it is. I will say this carefully: When both partners are fully committed to making a complete relationship transformation and becoming 100% secure and intimate together, it gets you the best marriage on the planet. And unfortunately, the price of entry was an affair and going through that experience together. If you want to think of it that way, it's going through an awful experience together to then both of you learn the skills neither one of you ever had or deployed to then build an incredible experience together. It's very, I have
Because
to be very
then
careful
you're
how I say that.
grieving. I know. Well, I think you said it well. And 100% emotionally safe doesn't mean 100% problem free or conflict free or stress free. And I think there is like a moment of like shared grief, like how freaking tragic that neither of us did our own healing work coming into the relationship. And this is what it took to catalyze us into this place. And that is, that is, no fault of their own. Like so many of us learn this stuff the hard way.
And that shared compassion right there is so crucial. Most people have such a hard time envisioning that because they come into it angry. I have to be angry so you'll take me seriously. Or the betrayed partner says, I have to grovel so that you'll see that I'm sorry. And reaching that place where they can both just say, how sad that both of us felt this was the best we could do, both of us. And that I made this choice, but that both of us thought this was a marriage. How sad for both of us. Now, how happy for both of us that we realize it's better than that.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like an experience that nobody should have to go through,
Correct.
but sometimes maybe must have to go through. Now, a lot of our viewers are actually in anxious-avoidant relationships. The woman tends to be more anxious, the man tends to be more avoidant. We see that demographic show up frequently in almost every conversation we have. And the number one question that anxious women ask us is around, how do I get my avoidant male partner to stay, especially in the space of intimacy? It sounds like there's two key findings from everything we've looked at so far. One is that there's no clear understanding of how intimacy, physical intimacy, is supposed to work in a marriage, because it's not going to be the same as when you start. It's going to evolve over time. People don't know what that evolution looks like. And two, there's a big question around, how do you properly bond with sex? How do you properly bond with physical intimacy, especially in that avoidant and anxious relationship? Dr. Solomon, do you have anything to share on that in terms of how do you prevent these horrible affair experiences in the first place with those two components in mind?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess the first thing I would say is that none of us can ever get anybody to do anything. That there's and I think that's sort of it's so easy for an anxious person to be like, okay, just tell me what I can be doing more of or do differently. And I think that is like, I have so much compassion for that because that's an ancient strategy that comes from all the things that you must have done when you were a little person trying to get your unavailable parents' attention, so that scramble makes so much sense. So part of the healing, I think, is stepping out of that frantic scramble to try to get an avoidant partner to be different. And in fact, what the Eli Finkel at Northwestern, where I teach, has some research that shows that when the anxious partner is able to self-soothe and step back a bit, it gives space for an avoidant partner to come forward, because that anxious avoidance cycle is a cycle. The anxious person stepping back is sometimes what's needed to help the avoidant person come forward. But when it comes specifically to sex, I guess I think there's this horrible, or not horrible, but just problematic intersection of the anxious avoidant dance that you're naming and patriarchal socialization that teaches men that sex is a means to an end. That I think so often he's avoidant because he has been taught to be laser focused on getting hard, staying hard long enough, getting to penetration. And there's I give workshops on this, like helping especially cis hetero couples deconstruct the sexual narrative, and have more permission to just, I want men to know that their entire body is a source of giving and receiving pleasure. It's not all about what their penis is or isn't doing. So I think that avoidant attachment intersects perfectly with this idea that he has one job during sex, and and when a couple can kind of step off of that like notion of how it's supposed to go, there's liberation for both partners. So and I think that the realm of the erotic can be actually quite a potent gateway for him to step out of some of those avoidant patterns, if he can start to like be more fully present and be like, actually, I don't have to do anything for anybody. I can be here with my partner, and I'm a good lover, regardless of what my penis is doing, regardless of like that there's that I think can be a space of healing.
Okay. What about you, Adam? What do you think is happening in the sexual expectation space and in the sexual bonding space that we can maybe point out and help a lot of those anxious avoidant couples who are experiencing, well, first, exactly what Dr. Solomon said around focus on sexual performance and unclarity on what this is even supposed to be about and how it's even supposed to work?
Most couples have no idea how sex is supposed to feel. Most of them have never had intentionally good sex together. And that's because most people are so focused on, again, the physical actions, the body parts, especially we're seeing modern generations raised by pornography as their main source of what sex is supposed to be like, what women are supposed to enjoy, how men are supposed to perform. We see a massive increase of men in their 20s pumping Viagra to try to perform at certain levels. We see women basically just dissociating during the entire act just to be performative and try to take care of men and use it as a strategy so he won't leave you, so that he'll be attracted to you, addicted to you. We see Cosmopolitan magazine for generations, right? How to do all of these things so he will
Drive
finally
him
love you.
crazy.
Right. He will finally love you when you do these 17 key things. Memorize them and recite them back in your head during the act, right? And that's ultimately what I think most couples are going in and doing, so that he almost forgets she's in the room and she forgets where she is at all. And it turns into this experience that is not an experience. It is just one more binge. And I think that until couples have intentional lovemaking and can honestly do that together and come to a place where their nervous systems regulate and cool enough, and they can calm down enough to not just be dopamine focused or cortisol focused, but oxytocin focused, vasopressin focused, serotonin focused, and do those slower, mutual, shared, joyful activities. Even the dreaded where you just stop having sex during intercourse and talk or laugh or be silly or do fun things together and maybe converse or even make eye contact and exchange a few words or check in with each other and have that shared experience, so that you are sharing an experience. You shouldn't be going, how should I say this? The bedroom experience should be no less engaging than sitting and watching a Marvel movie together, right? If you're going to sit and dissect the movie together and go through a thematic experience, you should be having a sexual experience that's shared. And as I'm saying all this, it probably sounds great, but again, there's a skill set way before the bedroom that needs to get you there. There's a whole conversational piece around how to conduct yourselves as human beings emotionally and in your relationship and with trust. It's hard for partners to come to this place and do this if they don't have trust in other areas. So being able to have all of those conversations that leads to a culmination of that physical joy, I think that's really the experience that we're looking for here. And I hope that the people out there, I hope that's not too foreign to you, but that's what we need to be doing.
And I think there is very likely a subset of men for whom sex is purely, deeply, to the marrow of their bones, transactional, and focused on their pleasure. But I think the vast majority of men that I have met and worked with and taught really want to create a wonderful experience with their partners. And they'll be like, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? And that's a lovely question, but there's two problems. A, she may not know what she needs. Well, three problems. She may not know what she needs. B, she may not, if she knows what she needs, she may have a frick ton of shame verbalizing what she needs. And C, she may have the sense that he's asking, what do you need? So that I can give you an orgasm, so that I can feel good about myself. So it may feel like it's a question that he's asking her, but that he needs an answer to regulate his own sense of self-esteem and self-worth. So then her orgasm feels like it's another thing that she has to do to kind of prop up his self-esteem. So it's another, just another way that we've taught boys and men that they are good to the degree that they can, do something rather than just be in the space that Adam is describing.
Okay. So what are maybe 3 steps that a couple should take who is, let's maybe draw at this scenario, is sensing tension, right? So the woman or the man is sensing tension. They're feeling they're heading downhill. They're worried. They're starting to think there could be an affair in the distance. Maybe not what's happening now, not the red flags of, disappearing phone texts, etc. But just something could be off and we're heading in the wrong direction. They want to save the relationship and they want to do that with the minimum amount of pain and the max amount of love. What are the 3 steps they're supposed to take to prevent themselves from ending up, God forbid, in your office, Dr. Solomon, or in your office, Adam, so that they can start fixing this and getting to this amazing state that you guys are describing?
3 steps.
Well, I wrote my second book is called Taking Sexy Back, and it was a whole book for women around sexuality and how they've been taught to relate to their bodies and sex in general. And one of the things that my team and I did as we were researching for that book was we looked at the American sex education, world, and it's inadequate. Like none of us had the sex education that we ought to have had. So I think one step I really want couples to have is just to like really see themselves as like lifelong learners about sex. There are so many amazing resources now, books and podcasts. Emily Nagoski is one of my favorite teachers in this area, and she has a wonderful book now called Come Together. And there's so many great. I mean, I can, you can put in the show notes all my favorite books about sex. But I want couples to be reading, and listening together about sex, and just to see it as that's part of how they take care of each other and their relationships. So that's one.
Adam, let's maybe throw
Point
in
number 2.
Yeah, good point number 2.
Really look at places where you are having hard times having conversations together as a couple. If you're having a hard time verbalizing when you say, hey, can I talk to you about something that we could do different together? I've been feeling sad lately. Here's what I think is coming from. Here's what I'd love for us to try that might help. Are you open to that with me? Look at where you're having a hard time doing that. Are you having a hard time articulating it or figuring it out? Maybe you need some help there. Are you afraid to share it because no one's ever taken you seriously before in your life? Is your partner a little bit more shut down? Do they take that as a criticism? Where is the disconnect? Do a search on your process and then troubleshoot anything that's preventing you guys from being able to discuss back and forth difficulties, solutions, and then applications. Really just do that. If you can have those conversations, I think things will get quite a bit better. And then, Dr. Solomon, do you have maybe a third thing people can do?
I got it. What I would want couples to do is hold time for experiences that are fun, silly, playful, new. So I think so often couples, I think like Saturday night date night, is like the thing. But even that can become sort of routinized, and maybe sitting at a table face to face feels like too much. So taking a dance class or an art class, or like there's research that shows that those kind of like novel experiences where everyone's like a little bit off center, like, oh my God, what are we doing? Those are really good for couples. And there's something about seeing your partner in a different context that can really like kind of add a little juice to the system. And those kinds of things, it's so easy to fall into routines and roles. And so long-term couples especially have to be so intentional about shaking things up. And it doesn't matter what it is, but can things are really busy with kids and jobs. Can it be that you do a Friday morning brunch together? Like a date doesn't have to be Saturday night. It can be whenever the two of you say, we're holding this time for us.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So in this case, I'll tie it off with a last question for both of you, something that a lot of viewers at home are curious about, and is this: what is proper sex supposed to feel like, and how often are you supposed to have it? Maybe Dr. Solomon, I'll start with you.
Well, proper sex is supposed to feel pain-free, unless you want to be exploring pain as part of your pleasure. But I don't want anybody to be persisting through pain. And proper sex is sex that you feel where you're able to say yes and you're able to say no, thank you. When you're able to say more and you're able to say less. And everybody has the ability to voice, a change at any point along the way. And ideally, where both people feel like just kind of, well, not ideally, and where both people feel present in their bodies with a kind of gentleness, so we call it spectatoring, that there's sometimes we exit our bodies and we like look from above at, oh my gosh, what is my, what are my hips looking like? Or we can get kind of self-critical and concerned about how we smell or how we sound or how we look. And so in a really wonderful sexual experience, you're sort of fully present inside of your body without judgment.
Mm. And how often
And then,
should this
how
happen?
often?
Yeah.
How often? How often is the only metric, as Emily Nagoski says, the only metric is pleasure. So it's not about frequency. So I won't say any. Okay, the only thing I will say is that research has found that there's no more than once a week doesn't give you any additive benefit, but it ought to be. It I think when we start doing that scorekeeping of how often we have and we haven't in this long, that means that there's something else we aren't saying. So I want couples to be less focused on the quantity and more focused on the quality.
Okay. Adam?
So frequency, 6 times a day. No, talk about that as a couple. For the number that you'll both be very satisfied with is probably closer than most people think. But it should be something that you're both comfortable with in your season of life. If you're a young couple in your 20s, you're probably going to want it a lot. And if you're an older couple in your 60s or 70s, you might still want it a lot, and power to you, but maybe that has slowed down a little bit. Maybe it's more the shared experiences out of the bedroom that you really enjoy. I think good, loving sex between two people in a couple should be two things. It should be cumulative, where the accumulation of all of the love and intimacy and connection in the relationship builds into the sexual experience, if that makes sense. It should be an expression of everything else that's going on between you, and it should be unitive. Whatever you're doing, if it's a quickie or a 5-hour love session, it should bond the two of you deeper than it did before the act. It should be something that you both walk away from feeling closer to your partner, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Well, this was a wonderful conversation. Sex, affairs, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what it's supposed to feel like. So I think a lot of the folks back home think about this hard and let us know the questions that you have for us and for Dr. Solomon in the comments. Dr. Solomon, thank you very much for coming on. Where can we find more of you and your information, maybe a little bit about your books, and how can people work with you?
Yeah, it was wonderful to be here with both of you. Thank you so much. My website is dralexandrasolomon.com, and there you'll find hundreds of blog articles, a link to my weekly podcast, which is called Reimagining Love, and information about my 3 books, Loving Bravely, Taking Sexy Back, and Love Every Day, which are available wherever books are sold.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
I also have, I will mention, I have an entire e-course that is for couples post-infidelity who are exploring recovery. So it's called Can I Trust You Again? And that information about that is also on my website.
Okay, well, that's amazing. Adam, where can we find you?
I am Adam Lane Smith, the attachment specialist. You can find all of my work on adamlanesmith.com, where I have courses on how to fix your attachment, how to love each other more thoroughly. I also have my attachment repair program if you're facing infidelity or if you're making sure that that doesn't happen in your relationship. You're welcome to come in as individuals or as a couple.
Amazing. And everybody listening, please make sure you subscribe and follow this channel. And also, if you look up I Wish You Knew on Google, anywhere else, you'll be able to find our Instagram, our TikTok, our YouTube, our podcasts. Basically everywhere that you choose to listen to us, we're there. So please make sure you follow along to not miss key information and amazing relationship advice.